Welcome to the Expat Chat, the show where we bring you inspirational interviews from expats, retirees, and global nomads who are living their dream life overseas cheaper, easier, and more carefree than their old life back home, bringing you your daily escape to paradise. Here's your host, Tony Argyle.
Hi folks, welcome to this episode 23 of the Expat Chat. I'm your host Tony Argyle and I'm really looking forward to today's show. I know you will too because we're going to be speaking to one of the world's biggest travel bloggers. Facing death is the ultimate motivation to revisit your life's purpose and ask yourself whether what you're doing is truly making you happy. For Barbara Weibel, that challenge came to a head in 2007 when, dealing with Lyme's disease, she realised her corporate life was making her richer but leaving her feeling empty inside. She hopped on a plane to Vietnam, writing the story of her journey while away. Upon returning to the US, she discovered that over 1,200 people had found her journey worth reading. And with that as her motivation, she embarked on a permanent travel lifestyle that has taken her to 60 countries over the past 9 years. Barbara has become one of the world's biggest travel bloggers and has proven that a single woman in her 50s can travel the world safely with the right attitude. Her saying, "Faith and fear can't live in the same place," has been her source of comfort along her journey. We caught up with Barbara in Croatia, where she shared her insights into how she lives her life and why the American dream is not delivering on its promise. Hello Barbara, nice to be speaking to you today.
Hi Tony, good to talk to you too.
Now tell the listeners where you are in the world and what you can see from your location.
Oh, right now I am in a little town called Weibel, Croatia, which is on the coast along the Adriatic. And this is a centuries-old town, used to be an island, a walled city. And out my window I'm seeing old stone houses and these just amazingly polished cobblestone streets that glow in the sun.
Sounds great. I love it when people start conversations with "right now I'm in," because that sounds like, if it's Tuesday it might be Paris. You know, it sounds a lot more exotic that way, doesn't it?
I have to admit that there are days when I wake up and I'm not sure what country I'm in, Tony.
Oh, it's a terrible problem to have. I do feel sorry for you. So how long have you been in Croatia for now?
I just got here about 4 days ago. I spent the previous 3 weeks in Slovenia, and before that I was in Hungary for a month.
Now, you're not new to this, so give us a bit of the history about what it is that you're doing and how long you've been doing it for.
Well, I'm an escapee, if you will, from corporate life. I spent 36 years working for various corporations and basically hating my life. All I had ever wanted to do was be a travel writer and photographer, but of course life gets in the way and you have to find a way to earn money and live. So I gave up that dream and spent all those years doing things I hated for all the wrong reasons until one day I got pretty sick. I had chronic Lyme disease that it took them 5 years to diagnose, and by the time they figured out what was going on, I was very ill. And I got scared that I was going to die and not be able to do any of the things that I'd always wanted to do. So I promised myself that if I could recover, I would walk away from everything. And that's what I did. It took me about a year to get better, but I put a backpack on and I bought an around-the-world ticket, and I went on the road for 6 months to all the places that I'd always wanted to see. Which is kind of funny in itself because the longer you travel, the longer your wish list gets. So instead of getting smaller, I have many new places on it now that I want to see. And that was about a bit more than 8.5 years ago. Coming up on 9 years in February, I will be traveling. I hadn't intended to make this my life's business or for it to be my way of earning a living, but by the time I got back from that first 6 months, the blog that I had created simply for my friends and family to keep track of where I was had about 1,200 readers, and I thought, maybe I can do something with this. And, 8.5 years later, my Hole in the Donut Cultural Travels is one of the top 50 travel blogs in the world.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So how long did it take you to get 1,200 readers?
Oh, well, that was just the first 6 months. And, as I said, it surprised me that anybody other than my friends and family were reading it, but I seem to have struck a nerve because there are so many people of my age, and I am a baby boomer, I'm 63 this year, who have spent their lives doing things that they don't like, and they were intrigued by the fact that I walked away from everything and just pursued what I was passionate about. And I think there are a lot of people out there who dream of doing the same thing.
So take us back to that point where you made the decision, because obviously the catalyst for you was the illness, but did you wake up one morning and suddenly think, because this can't have been an easy decision for you, I mean, especially, you do most of your travel on your own, which is a big thing to do, particularly for a woman who's of a baby boomer generation to be traveling. What was the final straw for you? What was the catalyst that got you going?
I think it was the fact that I thought I was potentially facing death, and that I'd not been true to myself all those years. I'd spent 36 years in jobs for the sole purpose of earning money so that I would be comfortable in my retirement, because that's what had been drilled into me all my life. You work hard so that you can retire. And the money had never made me happy. In fact, I was quite miserable. So I decided it didn't matter. And frankly, I went through a process. First I sold the house. I had to sell it for less than what I had in it. I had 2 properties that I was in the middle of the real estate decline and couldn't get rid of. And it's kind of a long story, but I went ahead and gave those back to the bank, ended up in a lawsuit with one, basically lost everything except my Social Security and a small retirement fund. And there were many times when I thought I shouldn't do this. My family thought I was crazy. My friends thought I was crazy. But this time I decided that I was going to be true to myself. So I persevered, and it worked out fine.
That must have been a scary decision for you. I mean, you were walking away from a comfortable income. Admittedly, financially, things weren't good, but you must have been rather scared, were you, at that stage? I mean, what was the thoughts going through your head?
Well, I'm not a person who gets scared. It was scary, but I have a saying, faith and fear can't exist in the same space. And I've spent my life recreating myself, because I'm one of those people, if you want to call me an A-type personality, but I need a challenge. And so I had about a 10-year attention span in my various careers. And once I had solved the problems, I was no longer interested. And so I would move, and find a new challenge. I knew that I could recreate myself and do this as well. And in fact, everyone told me it couldn't be done. I was 54 at the time, and they said, you can't possibly break into travel writing without a portfolio and with no experience. Well, you just don't tell me I can't do something, because then I'm going to do it just to spite you. So I kind of proceed without fear, because I do have faith in myself. I am quite unique in terms of the typical solo female traveler, or even the typical American who travels independently. There are not a lot of us. Americans especially tend to do all-inclusive vacations or tours, or stay in an international hotel where they can have their normal, comfortable experience. Now, some of that is fear, but also a lot of it is that most Americans only get 2 weeks of vacation. So we don't have the luxury of Europeans that have 5 or 6 weeks a year, and they can wander. And if they get stuck in a spot a day longer, it doesn't make any difference. That's the kind of lifestyle that I now live. If things don't work out, I just stay an extra day somewhere or go somewhere else.
Gives you great flexibility. I love that saying, faith and fear can't live in the same space. I'm going to have to get that. I'm going to put that at the top of the little article that will go with your recording. That would sum it up very nicely. So where all have you been so far?
Well, Croatia, where I am now, is my 60th country.
60.
There are 200 countries in this world, and I'm never going to see them all, because I never do the one day in a place. Very rarely do I spend a day in a place. I tend to like to be in a place 4 or 5 days at a minimum, and in a country 3 or 4 weeks at a minimum, because I write about culture, and you can't get into the heads of the local people and find out about the culture when you're just staying a day or two. So I figure if I am lucky, I will see 100 countries before I die.
Well, you're well on track the way you're heading. There's no doubt about that. So tell us how you travel, because obviously we're not talking high-end hotels here. You're not sitting in air-conditioned buses looking at famous sites. What's your typical mode of travel, and where do you normally stay?
Okay, well, I go back to the States every now and again to see family, usually at holidays. And then I get a one-way ticket on a plane to a continent. And I have a general idea of what I might like to see, which countries I might like to visit. And once I get on the ground, and I might have a reservation, for instance, at the first place that I intend to stop at, but I don't plan an itinerary. I just have a loose list of countries or cities, and I stay in the first place until I'm tired of it, basically, until I've seen everything I think I want to see. And then I move on to the next place. I stay typically in hostels or small guest houses, or lately I've been using rental apartments, which are very affordable, through things like Airbnb. And I like that because I love the hostels because of the camaraderie. There are always common areas, and they're filled with other travelers. And you get together in the evening, and you swap stories, and you hear about places that you might not have known about previously, which is one of the benefits of traveling independently like I do, because I have this great flexibility. If somebody tells me about a place 100 miles away, I'm not trapped into some reservation that I have to try and cancel if I want to see that. Guest houses and the rental apartments are much more local than that because they're owned by local people. And I like to support the local economy for one thing, but I also like to stay with the locals because they know all the secret places. They know the restaurants that are owned by the local people rather than the tourist traps. It's an amazing experience to connect with these local people, and if you like, I can tell you about a couple of experiences in Slovenia I had that were just remarkable because I connected with local people.
Oh, please do.
As I said, I just spent 3 weeks in Slovenia, and I started in the eastern part of the country in a little town called Ptuj. It's a 600-year-old town. It goes back actually to the Stone Ages, but the houses are 600 years old, winding up a hill to an old castle. And I found a place called Hostel Sonce, which means sunshine in Slovenian, and a lovely young couple with a baby about 1.5 years old that owned it. And I don't know why, but we just clicked. And I wanted to go visit Maribor, which is the second largest city in Slovenia after Ljubljana, the capital. But I was having a real problem making connections with the local transportation. I couldn't figure out online how to use their bus. It showed 30 stops in Maribor and 20 in Ptuj, and none of them returned any schedules for me. So the owner of the place, who with a 1.5-year-old boy, had not had a day off since she had the baby, so her husband said, just take the day off and take Barbara to Maribor. Oh. So she drove me up to Maribor. We spent the day together. I ended up having meals with the family. They were just such lovely people. And in fact, I'm going back to Hungary probably next summer to Budapest, which is one of my favorite cities in the world. And I think she and her son are going to come and meet me and stay with me for a month.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's the kind of connections that I make. I got to Ljubljana, and the bartender who worked in the local B&B where I was staying, I asked him if they had any elderflower, which is, I don't know if you may be familiar with it. It's a very popular drink in Europe. And they did not. But the next day he showed up with a bottle of it from his own barrel fermentation on his farm.
Great. And it's those experiences that people just don't get when they are being tourists, isn't it? I mean, exactly. It's people that make a place, isn't it?
It really is. It's the culture, the language, the art, the history of the place. And of course, Europe has so much more history than we do in the U.S. simply because it's older. Yeah.
So you've been to nearly 60 countries now. What would you have one that you would say is your favourite?
Oh, I do. If you had asked me that earlier in my travels. In fact, people asked me that all the time, and I couldn't answer it. And then I went to Nepal. And I went there basically to try and find a yogi that I could work with, because I do yoga. I had been struggling with some hip and knee problems that had gotten pretty bad, and I thought, well, if I just plunk down for 3 weeks and do some yoga and try and straighten out whatever's going on with my joints, I'll be better off. And I do this often. You know, if I get tired of traveling, I just stop and stay in one place for a while. So I went to Pokhara, which is the second most popular tourist destination in Nepal after Kathmandu, and I looked for a yogi, and I found this man, Naran Dakal, and started working with him. He really helped me with my pain. And through this process, I got to know his family. Well, I had gone for 3 weeks, and 5 months later, I was still in Nepal. That's what happens to me, you know.
Yeah.
In November, I think it was, they have a couple of very important religious festivals, one of which is called Tihar. And on day 5 of Tihar, they invited me to participate in their home in a ceremony called the brother-sister Tika ceremony. And if you don't know, the Tika is the little dot that Hindu women wear on their forehead between their eyes. And once a year at this ceremony, the brothers and sisters give each other tikas of a design that is made by the family. Every family has their own individual design. And I said, sure, I would love to come, and spent the day with the family and helped them prepare the meal. And we did this rainbow-colored bar tika on each of our foreheads. And at the end of the day, I said, thank you very much for letting me be part of your family for the day. And Naran said to me, no, Didi is older sister, you don't understand. Now that you've been part of our brother-sister Tika ceremony, you're a part of our family forever.
That's amazing.
And I still get choked up when I tell that story, because, you know, there's the family that you're born into, and there's your family of choice. And I have people all over the world now who are my family of choice, including the Dakals. And since that time, I have spent, probably too long for this interview, but have spent time with them every year. I've helped them build a business, a homestay. I've taken them basically out of poverty and into a successful business that allowed them to send their oldest son to engineering school, and he is now applying for graduate studies at George Washington University in the United States.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you what you've loved the most about what you've done, but I think you've just told me there, haven't you?
I am very conflicted about volunteering and about charity organizations. And in Nepal, there are some, they don't even know how many, because there's no government oversight on NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And they estimate that there is somewhere between 40 and 60,000 of them, because anyone can slap up a sign and have an NGO overnight. And the large majority of them, my guess would be more than 90% of them, are not legitimate. They are not helping the people that they purport to help. The money is just going in the pockets of the people who've opened the organization. And so I don't mean to imply they're all bad. Many, especially international NGOs, are doing great work in helping people. But you have to be very careful where you're spending your money. There are some good ones, especially international NGOs, that are doing great work, helping lots of people. But you have to do your homework and make sure that who you're working with is legitimate. And because so many of the local NGOs in Nepal are corrupt, they're really not benefiting anyone but the people who opened them. I choose instead to work with local people that I find around the world rather than NGOs.
And working one-on-one, so you can see the benefit of what you're doing that way, obviously, too. So, do you? I was going to ask you the question: how often you do revisit people? You've seen obviously these people you see quite frequently. Do you revisit a lot of your other friends that you've met on the road?
I do some of that, but the problem is that there are so many places in the world and not enough time. So I tend to not want to go back to too many places I've been before. There are some notable exceptions, one of them being Nepal, the second one being Thailand, which I'm absolutely addicted to Thailand. And the third one being Budapest. I quite like that city. I think probably better than any city in the world.
Definitely contrasting there. How do you, if you don't mind me asking, how do you finance, or what's the costs of doing what you're doing? Because to most people, the idea of travel is expensive, and especially the thought of going to 60 countries, most people think they have to be millionaires to do that. What's your average monthly cost, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's difficult to say. I'm asked that a lot, and I can't really give you an average, but what I can do is give you some ranges. Because for me, I am a travel writer, so I do get some things for free. For instance, I work with Viking River Cruises, who I think do a marvelous job, and they sponsor me. So when I take a cruise with them, I'm basically getting, a week or two for free. And that kind of jumbles up the question of how much things cost me. But I can say this. From the time that I started traveling in 2007, I probably averaged somewhere between $18,000 to $22,000 a year. Now, that's less than I can live in the United States for.
Yes, definitely.
The hostels, some places are more expensive than others. In Europe, it's more expensive. So my average in Europe is somewhere between $40 and $50 a night. In Asia, in many places, I can live for $10 a day in accommodations. For instance, I spent 2 winters ago in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and I stayed at what's called a residence. A lot of American and British expats stay in these facilities. They're brand new, modern. It's like a big hotel room with your own private bathroom and a little cooking area and a patio overlooking the city. And shiny tile floors and air conditioning and, beautiful decor. And the entire thing, including all of my utilities and Wi-Fi, cost me about $350 a month.
Wow.
The same thing in Budapest, for instance. I can get an apartment there, a studio apartment, for about 350 euros per month. The average wage in Hungary is only 300 euros a month. So it's quite inexpensive.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those people who has to eat in fancy restaurants. Especially if I'm in a rental apartment or a hostel, hostels have common kitchens. So I buy my food for breakfast, or if I'm in a hostel that provides breakfast, I eat breakfast there, and then I sort of shove rolls and cheese in my pockets for lunch.
Why not?
Everybody who stays in a hostel does that.
Yeah.
And then I have a dinner out. And for instance, in Paris, everyone complains about the price of food in Paris. I go to the local bakeries, boulangerie, and I get a piece of quiche for dinner. I buy fresh bread in the morning and have that with olive oil and cheese that I've bought at the grocery store. I don't find that eating is expensive, but I also don't live to eat. I eat to live.
Yes, you can spend as little or as much as you want on food, can't you? But it must be surprising sometimes, countries that you go to, and I guess Europe's one of those countries for a lot of people where they perceive it as expensive. But what you're saying about Hungary, there's a lot of countries around like that, isn't there, that are quite affordable? What's some of the least expensive countries that you've come across that have been a surprise to you?
Bulgaria was an amazing surprise to me. I spent 2 years ago, I think I spent about 6 months traveling around the Eastern Balkans. So I was in Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and I found that Bulgaria was not only extremely inexpensive, but also very friendly. And unlike the other Balkan countries who tend to be oriented toward meat and potatoes, Bulgaria is oriented towards the Mediterranean, basically. So their food is very Greek-like, if you will. Mm-hmm. Lots of fresh vegetables, beautiful salads. It's the only drawback to Bulgaria was the Cyrillic alphabet and learning how to read that, but I didn't find that too daunting. I managed. And I have to say that traveling around the world these days, people don't need to worry about whether or not they speak the local language because English has become the international language. Everybody speaks it, especially the younger people.
We're very fortunate in that regard. How many languages do you know now? You must have picked up a little bit of something as you've gone along.
Well, I get the traveler's vocabulary in every country. So I don't know how many languages I can say 1 to 10, or thank you, please, I need water, where is the bathroom, hello, goodbye, exit, enter, yes, no. I know all those words in, I don't know, maybe 20 languages.
Well, that's 80% of a conversation with somebody there, isn't it?
Yeah, because I'll tell you a funny story about that. All the years that I've been traveling, and I started traveling as soon as I was old enough to get off on my own, I had never been to Paris. I'd never been to France. And I was a little, uneasy about it because I'd heard all these stories about how rude the French were. And I don't speak too much French. I can read a lot of it because I speak Spanish, but I don't speak or understand very well. And my girlfriend from the UK said, don't worry, here's what you need to understand. Parisians especially are very reserved people, and they're very polite people. So when you start a conversation, you can't just, delve into it like you do, like most Americans would. If you go into a store and you're going to shop, in America you would walk in and say to the salesperson, I want to see that dress you've got on sale. In France, you must start every conversation with bonjour madame, bonjour monsieur. Because if you don't, they think it's rude.
Yeah.
And it worked like a charm. As long as I started every conversation with that, and when you walk into a restaurant or a store, it's your responsibility to announce yourself, bonjour, everything is fine. So it does help to learn a little bit of the local language, if even just, please, thank you, and hello.
It's just, I was talking to somebody just before actually about that with France, and there is that perception, and it's not true. She made this very same comment that if you make the effort to speak in French as a starting point, doors really open up then, don't they?
Absolutely. I had incredible kindnesses shown to me. I got off the airplane, took the bus into the center of Paris, to what was supposed to be a metro stop, but I didn't see the metro stop when I got off, and I was looking around sort of, where do I go? And a man walked up to me and in English said, can I help? And I said, yes, I'm looking for the Opera metro stop. Oh, come with me, he says. He takes me half a block to the stairway going down into the metro, hands me a metro ticket, and refuses to take any money for it. Mm. I mean, those are the things that happen to me, and I find that people around the world are mostly good. Yeah. I don't want to sound like a naive Nelly. I keep my eyes open. I'm aware of what's going on around me at all times. But I find that most of the time people are more than happy to help.
I think particularly too when it's pride in their own town. When there's a tourist, I think most people tend to puff out their chest and be quite proud and want to show their towns off, don't they? But how do you find 9 years, and being a woman travelling on your own can't be easy. How have you found safety? Has there been any incidents for you?
I have to disagree with you. I think it is easy. There are times, because I don't usually have reservations ahead of time, like I just yesterday decided that I am going to Zagreb, the capital of Croatia, next. And I still don't have a reservation. I'm leaving in 2 days. So there are times when that can get a little bit stressful. But basically, I hate to say this, Tony, but the only time I have ever had a problem is in my own country. I was robbed in Hawaii. I have never, in the last 9 years of traveling, felt unsafe once. And I think this whole hubbub about women traveling solo is just a ridiculous conversation.
It's good to hear that from a woman firsthand.
Yeah, and I think that what happens is when people travel, they do foolish things. They do things that they wouldn't do at home. They flash cash. They travel with all kinds of jewelry, which is very foolish. You're making yourself a target. They drink too much. Maybe they try and buy illegal drugs. They go places with strangers. And I go places with strangers. Don't get me wrong. I've been invited into many homes, but I make sure someone knows who I'm going with, where I'm going, and when I'm coming back.
Just showing a little bit of common sense.
Just common sense. And if people would practice common sense, and if they would practice listening to their gut and watching what's going on around them at all times, just something small like don't hang your purse on the back of a chair in a restaurant. I mean, you shouldn't do that at home.
Yeah.
I put my leg through the strap and hang it on my knee. Just common sense, and you'll be safe. Bad things happen, of course, but
yeah, well, that's right. It's just being prepared and as you say, keeping your eyes open as well. But you must have found it difficult changing from a corporate environment where things are planned, 6 months in advance to the nth degree, to now living this life where you don't really even know what you're doing at the end of the week, do you? Was that hard to transition?
It was a process, and I can vividly remember sitting in Los Angeles airport waiting for my plane to go to Vietnam. And that was my first trip in early 2007, that 6-month round the world one. And why I chose Vietnam because, I'm from the Vietnam era, and I felt it was something I needed to do. I needed that cathartic experience. But it was a bit terrifying, because Vietnam was just really opening up to tourism at that point 9 years ago. And I look back on that and kind of laugh, because now what was a little scary for me has become commonplace. So it's like anything else. Once you get used to it, it becomes your life, and it's no longer something to be afraid of.
It's expanding your comfort zone, isn't it? It becomes a new comfort zone for you.
It is. And the things that come from travel, in addition to meeting local people and broadening your education, basically, you learn how to be flexible. You learn patience. You learn how to laugh at yourself. You learn how to live with all these expectations that we all seem to have these days.
You go back to the States from time to time, and obviously you'd miss family and friends, but what else do you miss about America?
Oh, dear, I'm going to make people hate me. I don't miss anything about America.
Nothing wrong with honesty.
Well, I will admit that when I've been in third world countries, developing countries, for a long period of time, and I go back to the States, I love the idea that I can put the toilet paper in the toilet instead of the trash can.
Yeah.
I love the fact that we have a great infrastructure. I mean, America has wonderful infrastructure, the highways, and it's clean. Asia, I am addicted to, but that's because I have learned to look past the surface layer of dirt and trash and get to the underbelly of Asia. But there just is no order. In India, they have lanes painted on the roads, but nobody uses the lanes. No. And so the orderliness of America and the rules and regulations, which I think are too onerous in general, but that's another conversation. But at least it creates an orderly society where people sort of follow the rules, and that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
But basically, I look around and I see a lot of people doing what I did for 36 years. I'm as guilty as the rest. It's work, 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 money, 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 buy, buy, buy. And the amount of stuff that you want expands exponentially with the amount of money that you earn. Mm-hmm. And I now, I have, 12 or 15 plastic bins stored in my father's garage crawl space. That's all I have left other than the suitcase I travel with. And what's in those bins are only personal mementos. My artwork, a few little things that I gathered maybe some winter clothes if I ever go back there, but not much. We don't need as much as we think we need. And I think that we've gotten trapped in America into this cycle of needing to work more to get more money so that we can buy the next new thing. And I'm afraid that we've lost sight of our values about what's really important in life.
I'm not going to argue with you there. One thing as a non-American, as everyone will know that I'm not by now, is it surprised me that there is only 2 weeks holiday as standard in the US. I had no idea. I mean, we have 4 weeks pretty much in Australia. New Zealand's the same. Much of Europe is even longer, but it's a very short window to actually really enjoy life if you're an American working in a corporate environment, isn't it?
Well, it is, and unfortunately, even though people have these 2 weeks, statistics are showing that many are not even using those 2 weeks because there is some fear that if I leave the job for 2 weeks, I will be found I will be seen as A, disloyal, or B, they'll figure out they don't need me and I might lose my job. But it's more pervasive than that. It's the fact that we're hired for a 40-hour week, and I can't remember a job that I ever had where I worked less than 60 hours a week. And what suffers is family and friends and our ability to relax. Europeans and Asians, it's changing a bit here. You know, they're moving more toward the American market-driven idea, but still they know how to enjoy life more than we do. They understand that family and friends are a very important part of life.
Yeah. You're not going to go back to the old life anytime soon, are you? I can tell.
No. In fact, I came back from that first 6 months, and you'll laugh, but my plan was I'll travel for 6 months, I'll come back and write a book, and that'll take me 6 months, and it'll be a bestseller, and then I'll go back and get another job. Well, you know, I wrote part of the book, and that was 9 years ago, and I've never picked it up again because my blog just keeps me so busy. But the travel ruined me for ever going back into corporate life because that seems very plastic to me. It's really hard to explain, but
no, it's not. I can fully understand once you start doing what you're doing that you would not want to go back.
Yeah, no, there's no way I could do it.
Fortunately,
I don't have to.
No, well, that's right. What would you say to somebody who was maybe considering doing what you were doing? What advice would you have for them?
Well, now, are we talking about as an expat in retirement, or are we talking about doing the blog?
Well, let's talk about the retirement side of things, because I think a lot of people have barriers to doing what you were doing, or perceived barriers, which you've pretty much blown out of the water in the last 40 minutes already. But if they were going to start doing, if they were inspired by what you were doing, what would you suggest they do, or how they should approach it?
Well, I think if you have, let's say, access to $25,000 to $30,000 a year from retirement sources, that you can pretty much retire as an expat in many places comfortably. I would start researching what are the recommended expat destinations and maybe travel to them, take an extended vacation, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and stay there and see how you like it. I have a friend who retired, went to Ecuador, to Cuenca, and made the mistake of renting an apartment for a year and furnishing it, and then found out he didn't like it. Like me, now he travels the world. He just left a couple of days ago to spend a year in Mexico, and he and I find that it's better we can't conceive of staying in one place forever. We just get too intrigued by stuff. So you can do it that way, or you can find a place that suits you. There are lots of places in Mexico, for instance, in Central America, in South America. Colombia is a really interesting destination these days because people think of it as the drug capital, but that's long gone.
Yep.
It's a very safe country now and beautiful with a great climate. Bogota is a gorgeous city. Cartagena is a beautiful city. There are places in Eastern Europe that you can live. I'm from Croatia. I'm intending on going to Bosnia-Herzegovina, as well as Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Albania. And all of those are extremely cheap destinations and places that you could live like a king on $20,000 a year. Mm. So you have to do a bit of research, and I think you have to get out there and experience it.
There's certainly a lot of options out there, and it's interesting you bring up Colombia because I've interviewed a couple of people in the last week about Colombia, and my perception was just that, and it's clearly changed as a country. And if there's listeners who haven't heard those interviews, go back and check them out because it's a fascinating country. But I'm also quite fascinated by your interest in the Balkans because that's an area I've been looking to talk to people about as well because it is reasonably affordable, and I've heard it is a beautiful area too. So it'd be very interesting to see your experiences of travelling through there. We'll look forward to following that on your blog. But final question, Barbara, and you've really answered this to a large extent anyway, but I'm looking forward to your answer on this a little bit more. How would you say what you've done has changed your life?
Oh, for the first time in my life, I'm happy. It's very interesting because I used to earn a lot of money, and I was never happy. Now I earn very little money, and I'm ecstatically happy. So I don't know what that tells you, but
it pays to at least by the sound of it.
Yes, and I want to mention one other thing. When people are considering moving to other countries, one of the things they must check on is the tax consequences. They need to make sure that the country that they are looking at does not tax retirement income from the United States. That's very important. Mm-hmm.
Yes, because as a US citizen, you are taxed worldwide on your income, I think, isn't it? Which is a little bit different to how some countries.
That's correct. The U.S. is the only country in the world that taxes based on citizenship rather than residency. Yeah. However, if you're out of the U.S. for 330 out of every 365 days, then you have a huge amount that is non-taxed. It's exempt from tax, something in the 90,000 range or higher. The first 90-some thousand are not taxable. So you just have to be careful and check into those things.
Well, there's another good reason to spend 330 days traveling, I think, isn't it?
Yes, I agree.
Barbara, thank you so much for your time today. I know I said at the beginning of this interview that we'd have so many minutes. I threw the clock out about 5 minutes into the interview already. I was more than happy that we keep talking because you're indeed inspirational. That word maybe gets used a little bit too often sometimes, but there's so many fantastic stories of what you've done, and you're an inspiration to people because you tick so many boxes of what is not the normal in doing this. And you show that it can be done, and I think that's fantastic in itself. You've had terrific experiences from travelling, and if people want to know more about what you have done and touching base with you and hearing your stories, just tell them how they can get in touch with you again.
Well, they just need to go to my blog, which is holeinthedonut.com, and it's HOLE in the DONUT.com. And they can search by country, or they can follow me along on a day-to-day basis, or, like my Facebook page, which in addition to my written stories tells you day-to-day the crazy things that are happening to me.
Now, I'm glad you spelt that because donut in the US is not actually spelt the same as it is in Australia or England or some other countries. Correct. So it is a DONUT donut. But we'll be putting the links up for that on the web page anyway. And you also been involved in a book, haven't you, and with Lonely Planet?
Yes, Lonely Planet at one point had a group called Blog Sherpas, and they imported our content onto their website. And as part of that, we had a book published called Around the World with 40 Lonely Planet Bloggers. And if somebody wants to get that, they just look at the right-hand sidebar on my blog, and there's a picture of the book. And they sign up to receive an email from me once a week that has all the stories and photos that I publish, and that allows them to download that book for free.
Good stuff. Well, it's anything but a lonely planet with people like you on it, I have to say that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today. I know that everyone's going to enjoy this interview. I've certainly enjoyed doing it with you, and I'm looking forward to following your blog further and sharing the experiences, as I know everyone else will be too. So, Barbara, on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Tony.
What a truly amazing woman. You've probably noticed this interview is a little bit longer than usual. Honestly, I could have left the recording device going all day with Barbara, and we barely even got onto the topics of any of the countries she's visited. Her experience, the way she travels, is truly inspirational, and I'm sure you've enjoyed it as much as I have. What have I learnt from speaking with Barbara today? Well, firstly, there are no barriers to being a perpetual traveller. Barbara has not allowed age, sex, or any other barriers stand in her way to doing what she loves. She's happier for the experience and stands as motivation to millions of baby boomers that the best years don't have to be behind you once you reach your 50s or 60s. Secondly, travel is all about people. Wonderful as many of the countries have been that she's visited, ultimately it's the people that make the difference. You can't build a relationship from an air-conditioned bus during 2 weeks of annual holidays. If you base yourself on a location and put yourself out there, you'll be continually staggered at the kindness that your fellow humans will show you. Thirdly, Barbara highlighted many of the well-known expat destinations as being well worth visiting, and Colombia again gets a mention. But what was particularly interesting was her take on Eastern Europe, including Hungary, but particularly the Balkan states such as Croatia and Bulgaria. These places offer a lot with very affordable lifestyles, and I feel sure they will become increasingly popular as expat havens in the future. We'll be following these areas with more interest. And lastly, being a woman doesn't expose you to greater travel risk. Barbara has had no incidents in 9 years outside of the US, that is, and believes much of the concern is misplaced. Well, I've enjoyed today, and I hope you have too. We'll be talking to Barbara again at some stage in the future as we delve into some of the countries in which she's visited. Don't forget, give us a like on Facebook and a share, and if you do, we'll be making sure we'll give you a shout out on the show. Also, jump onto iTunes and give us a rating or review. We'll really appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. I look forward to talking to you on the next one. I'm your host, Tony Argyle. We'll see you next time.